The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. My name is Bill Baker, and we're pleased to have you join us. Just a couple of rules. You are all on mute, but if you do have questions during the webinar, you can use the question facility over on the right-hand side of your screen. And if we have time, we'll try to respond to some of your questions. If not, we'll get to those after the broadcast. Our presenter today is Cheyenne Marling. Cheyenne is very well known in the industry. She speaks at many different kind of organizations. She will be at the DRJ convention in about a month from now. And to know Cheyenne is to know how capable and competent she is. She is a true leader in the business. And without further ado, over to you, Cheyenne.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for joining us today. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. Today we're going to talk about how to attract top talent in a competitive market. More than ever, the market has just changed, and I'm finding the companies are really struggling in attracting the top talent candidates and getting candidates to even apply to their positions. So we're going to focus on our slide deck today. Let me make sure I advance here. A little bit about me, and Bill, you gave such a great introduction there. Thank you so much. I've been in the industry now for 20 years, recruiting, placing experienced business continuity, disaster recovery, risk, crisis management professionals. I fell into this niche market back in 1998 during Y2K planning. And loved the industry, loved how passionate everyone was, and it just brought me in. I actually started BC Management back in 2000 and managed BC Management, a recruiting company specifically focused in this niche profession for over 18 years before Firestorm approached me and asked if I was ever interested in being acquired. So it made a lot of sense to join the organization, be a part of a larger team, offer more services to our clients. So, of course, I always like to make it not all about work. So in front of you in the slide deck, you see there's my two kids. So they are a big, big part of my life. And they've actually come with me on a few presentations, specifically to MIT. So they sat and watched me give presentations as well. So I think it's really important to, as you look in your career, to always make sure you have a good balance between home life and work. So I always include these little pictures of my family. The agenda today, as I mentioned, how to really make sure that you're attracting top candidates in a very competitive employment market. We're going to start off about, talking about the current employment market. What does that look like? What are the trends? We're going to talk about how to make sure you're really defining the personal needs that you need for your program, for your company. Talk about researching the market. It's really important to understand what the marketplace is before you go out and start hiring. We're going to look at intelligent interviewing, some things to do and some things not to do. And we're going to wrap up with some tips on some mistakes that you should really try to avoid in the hiring process. Again, I mentioned a little bit about Firestorm, or BC Management being acquired by Firestorm, but Firestorm has been in business since 2005. BC Management and Firestorm worked together really since 2009, so I was very familiar with their team prior to joining the organization. And of course, Firestorm is owned by Novume. Novume is a publicly traded company on Nasdaq. So looking at the current employment market, I love data. For those who know me, I am a data research nerd. Without the data research we've been doing for years. And this right here just demonstrates, I've been recruiting since 2000, so I've always been tracking the unemployment rate and the GDP because that impacts hiring. And you look at what happened right around 2008, 2009, where it just dropped. And we actually got a sense of what was happening before it really hit because we had candidates being let go, downsizing. So we knew it was bad before it really started to hit the news. And right now, the way the market is with unemployment rate being at 3.9%, and the GDP just growing, it's very reflective of the market we had, even before 2000, and how hiring was back then, and companies were so quick so quick in needing people. So right now we're seeing a tremendous amount of jobs being posted. I've been tracking jobs in the last 2 months, and I would say that we're averaging about anywhere between 20 to 40 new job postings a week, specifically within business continuity, resiliency planning, crisis management. And we haven't seen that much activity really ever. I mean, if you look at the market space and you know how it is to find jobs posted on the internet and Indeed and all the job posting sites, we've never seen this much activity. Usually, you know, in the last 2 years, you usually see about 5 new jobs posted a week. So a tremendous amount of activity. And with that, of course, with the unemployment rate dropping from 9.5% in 2009 to 3.9% currently, companies are finding that candidates are it's really a challenge to recruit, and candidates are not applying to job opportunities. There's less professionals seeking to make a change, coupled with companies are typically unable to utilize a third-party recruiting source. So a lot of my clients out there, they're struggling. They're not getting candidates responding to their jobs. They're unable to, you know, utilize our services, and typically they have to wait 60 to 90 days before they can engage us. And it's become policy to do that, which unfortunately the market just isn't what it used to be. You can't depend on posting a job and having candidates flock and apply to the positions out there. Candidates are less likely to be looking for positions, and companies are just really, really struggling. So the old way of posting jobs and having candidates respond is not the market space at this moment. There's also stalled hiring as well. I mean, if you stall in your hiring process and if you drag out the hiring process too long, you're going to lose that good candidate that is having multiple offers from other companies. It's certainly so much more of a candidate market at the moment. I always like to look at the LinkedIn and social media impact. You know, companies assume that if you post or go through LinkedIn and try to target candidates, that you're going to get the best candidates out there. Unfortunately, candidates are getting bombarded by recruiters, by companies trying to recruit them via LinkedIn, that it's becoming more of a nuisance than anything else. So the market has shifted so much to a candidate market, and companies really need to think outside the box on how they're looking to hire. A little bit of a market trend here. Again, we'd like to collect data. And as far as candidates looking for new positions with another company has decreased from roughly 13% to 9%. It cut off in 2017, so it should be 8.6% in 2017. So that market space right there, you know, companies are less likely to, you know, look for employment outside of their current organization. So if you're looking to hire, our research indicates that 14% of organizations will be seeking to hire personnel in the new year, but 14% are looking to hire, but less and less candidates are actively looking on their own. And that's really because, you know, 58% of the business continuity management professionals have been with the same company for less than 3 years, and they're not quick to jump right away. You also look at what's happened after the Great Recession, and at that point, the market was very saturated. You had candidates that were unemployed, or candidates that did not look for such a long time out, you know, during the recession. So once the economy improved, everyone was quickly jumping into the job market space and interviewing. So at that point, it was very, very easy to post a job and have a lot of candidates apply to the job, because you had such a huge candidate pool of those who haven't been looking for a new job for the last 5 years because of the market, and then those who were unemployed or perhaps independent consultants. So the way the market is right now, again, more companies are looking to hire, but less candidates are looking to make a move and look for those, you know, aggressively to conduct a job search. So looking at your personnel needs, it is really important to understand what makes sense for your program, what makes sense for your organization. So, you know, you need to look at where your program is today and where your program will be 3 years out. What disciplines are included in your program: business continuity, risk management, security. You need to look at what skills or credentials does your program and current team lack. How might your organization be changing in the coming years? What is the culture fit or the competencies that will complement your current team and organization? So if you're looking to, let's say, for example, you need to hire 3 people, but you're only able to hire 1 person, you're going to make the most out of that 1 hire and perhaps combine some of the competencies or skill sets that your program's lacking. So if you're doing business continuity and risk management, maybe third-party critical supplier, you're going to potentially combine some of those skill sets if you don't get your 3 hires and instead you get that 1 hire. So things to think about as you're looking to define what your personnel needs are. Really make sure that you take the time to research the market. So looking specifically at your job description, is it really communicating the right message? So once you've determined your personal credentials and competencies, it's crucial to ensure that the job description is communicating the right message. One of the biggest struggles that I've seen in the industry is that our terminology is all over the place. Not only do we mix and match business continuity, disaster recovery, resiliency, crisis management, emergency management, but let's just face it, the job titles are all over the board. Someone who's a business continuity program manager within one organization may manage the entire life cycle of the BC planning efforts along with staff management. But within another organization, this individual may assist with the planning initiative only. So a well-written job description should communicate appropriate job functions, reporting structures, required credentials, and the preferred skills. So I'm going to include, here's a sample job description from one of our clients. And they came to us, they were struggling months. They were not getting the right candidate. And if you look at this job description, you would assume that it's either maybe a government entity or the person's really, they're going to be doing more emergency management skills. But when they gave me the job description, they told me specifically that they were getting all these candidates applying, coming from public services, coming from the government sector, but they really wanted someone with that large global corporate business continuity planning expertise. And no wonder they were getting the wrong candidates because of the terminology that they were using in the job description. So if you as a candidate, if you were looking for a position and you typed in business continuity, this job wouldn't even come up in your job search. You would have to put in emergency management. Another example of a bad job description I don't have here for today's presentation, but we had another client in that they had a very entry-level position, and it was a business continuity planning analyst. And in that situation, they were trying to get a candidate with less than 3 years experience. And for those of you who don't know this, the industry of candidate or the pool of candidates with less than 3 years experience is less than 2%. So in that example, they were open to getting candidates with emergency management, crisis management, perhaps coming from risk management, and kind of mold them into business continuity planning. But the way their job description was written, it seemed that the person needed to have solid business continuity program management expertise in managing a program. So they were getting candidates with 20 plus years experience versus what they were really targeting. So when you look at your job description, and if you are looking to hire, make sure it's communicating the right message, the right terminology, and that you have the reporting structures. You indicate the years of experience that you're targeting as well. So important to also make sure that you benchmark an appropriate compensation. It's going to help you eliminate an exhaustive search that keeps running in circles with multiple offers being declined, and discovering also that the pool of candidates that you need for your role are all priced out of your price range. So for those who don't know, we have been collecting, again, I'm a data research nerd. We've been collecting data for, it's now 17 years. I'm going to quickly go through some of the data research from compensations that we've been conducting, but the last year, we published our 16th edition business continuity compensation report. We had participants, over 900 participants from over 40 countries. So great response. And our compensation report assesses more than 15 factors, including your title, years of experience, degree, certification, leadership skills, all these things that impact the candidate's earning potential. So a little trick that a lot of hiring managers or even HR, they don't understand. Again, if you look at the chart on the left, average base compensation by years of total work experience, not specifically within business continuity, but total work experience. And again, candidates with less than, I think it's less than 2 years experience, it's less than 2% of the candidate pool within the business continuity profession. So if you're looking to hire someone with less than even 5 years experience, you're going to find that a lot of individuals within our market space, they typically come from different industries. So they were doing perhaps program management, maybe risk management, maybe third party, even firefighting, all across the board from so many different career paths. And then they gravitate into business continuity. So they've probably been doing something else before getting into business continuity. And those skill sets are transferable, and thus their compensation is already perhaps priced out of the market space of what you're looking to hire if you're looking to get someone with less than 3 years experience. So that's one thing that looking at, you have to make sure that you are targeting the right message, really do your research in looking at the compensation. Another little trick here is that geography plays such a big part, not just looking at the cost of living and the large metropolitan locations are going to command higher compensation, but also looking at the law of supply and demand. There are certain locations where the pool of candidates is so much smaller. So you need to take that into consideration, especially some markets where there are companies that are competing for the same person. And I've noticed in my recruiting just in the last year, specifically Charlotte, that location has increased in compensation because, we have 5 key employers there that have been all hiring and targeting that market, and the compensations have increased faster than the cost of living. So a knowledgeable recruiter would understand this, and how important it is, again, to make sure that you take the time to research the market, understand what the market bears from a compensation point, so you're not spinning your wheels in circles and unable to get the right person, or having your offer turned down multiple times. I put this data chart up specifically because the last year, the 16th edition report was the first year ever that we did a gender assessment. So I'm kind of kicking myself that we didn't do it before, but I think it's also important to note what the market bears, when you're looking at, female versus male. And I should tell you that the market is also indicating that those individuals with less than 5 years experience are predominantly female now versus male. So that was an interesting little statistic that we found. And for those of you who have not participated, I encourage you to participate in the 17th edition study, and it's going to be closing on February 20th, 11 o'clock Eastern. So make sure you don't miss out, because you get an incredible report for participating. So now we're going to move on to intelligent interviewing, and there are certainly so many things to keep in mind as you go through the process, because not only communicating the right message in your job description and taking the time to research compensations and what the market bears, but you need to make sure that you put together a very targeted interviewing process. So you're really making sure that you're selecting the right candidate, that you're not making an emotional decision, but you're taking the time, you're investing time to define what the interview strategy is. So as far as interviewing tips, there are so many different types of interviews. Obviously, the telephone, a lot of our clients are doing the video conferencing now, especially if they're looking for a candidate to potentially make a move. It's sometimes easier to do that video conference before you pay for the flight for the person to come on site. As far as with going through the selection process, you have the situation, stress type of interviews, audition, have them, maybe perhaps indicate what they would do when they're activating an event. Kind of put them in an actual situation so you can see how they act on their feet and how quick they are to think through the process. Obviously, behavioral. You want to define the competencies and what makes sense for your organization, and have that kind of very, you could do either informal or do a reverse role, but making sure that you have very structured questions in place. And one thing I always like to mention is if you have a panel of interviewers, define who's asking which questions throughout the process. So you're, perhaps depending if it's someone that's involved in risk management or someone that's involved in compliance, perhaps have questions that are going to be more tailored to how they would interact with that potential candidate. And that, of course, leads into the panel of interviewers. So it's very important before you start the interview process or even start recruiting, really understand who's going to be involved in interviewing and selecting of the candidate. Of course, human resources, you always want to keep them involved. They are a good looking at the culture fit of the candidate. They're also going to go through and look through work history and really define that the person's personality traits are going to fit well with the entire organization. And then looking at the management team, who makes sense to be a part of the interview process. Again, if it's someone from compliance, someone from perhaps information technology, and maybe someone that even would be a coworker of that potential person too. My only word of caution though is if you have too many people in the hiring process, then you run into the risk of not everyone liking the same person, and then you have one person liking one person, the other person liking the other person, and you can't make a decision. So you need to again have the panel of interviewers defined, but I just always caution not to have make sure it's a good number and not too many, and also make sure that as far as your number of interviews is not drawn out too long, because if the process of interviewing a candidate is too long, again, that candidate is possibly being entertained by 4 or 5 multiple companies, and they could have an offer before you're even onto that 3rd interview stage. And that again jumps into my next slide here. So how many interviews that you have in the structure, your timeline that you defined. I'm seeing that the turnaround period of candidates from being submitted to the company to offer stage is much, much quicker. About 2 years ago, it could sometimes be 3-4 months, which sounds silly, but it was definitely a much longer process, and companies really didn't have to worry about necessarily losing the person or their ideal candidate. But right now, it's easily about a month. In fact, we have some companies that they're going to the 2nd interview stage on site, and the person's getting an offer the very next day. So keep in mind that your candidate, even if they weren't aggressively looking when you first approached them or when they applied to the job, once a candidate starts looking, even if they're specifically recruited for the job, you better guarantee yourself that they're going to start looking and probing for opportunities once they start interviewing with just even one organization. When you go through the evaluation process, make sure that you define a scoring method. How are you going to evaluate the candidates between each other? How are the interviewers going to score potential competencies or skills or the individual's background? So that will help you really define which candidate is going to be the best one for your role. And make sure that everyone is in sync with the skill sets, the competencies are needed. I've had some companies where they had someone from IT interview and then someone from risk management, and they couldn't even agree on the type of candidate they needed. The IT person needed someone more technical, and the risk management person wanted someone more business focused, and they were spinning their wheels back and forth around in circles. So make sure that everyone's on the same page. Whoever you include in the process, make sure they're included on the same page. As far as interviewing questions, obviously you want to make sure you have a culture fit. You could have a great candidate on paper and have all the skills, but if they don't match your culture, everyone's going to be disappointed. And that's not just the culture of their organization, but you have to consider the culture of your team as well, the other players in your team, because everyone needs to be in sync and work together. Also make sure that you're looking at, as you're interviewing candidates, really define the competencies that you need for your role. Again, it goes back to defining your personnel need for the hire. What competencies do you need to interview for? What competencies work best for your organization and for your team? Think about behaviors. Think about, are you a fast-paced, dynamic company? Does the person need to be able to operate or quickly make decisions? Think about some of the behaviors that are going to work well within your team and make sure that you interview for those behaviors through your interview process. Think about who are your current top performers on your team. What competencies do they have? And then you can assess and formulate your interview questions to really, go and target those specific skill sets that are based off your current top performers. Always be sure to ask very open-ended, kind of probing questions. But with that being said, you have to make sure you avoid the improper, discriminatory questions. And you would be surprised, even something as simple as if you're phone interviewing someone, and if they have a last name that's, Kanushima, you couldn't say, oh, so you must be Japanese. Something that simple where you're just trying to make conversation is a huge no-no. Obviously, you can't ask anything about family or child care or children. You can't ask anything about future family choices. You can't ask how often a person might be deployed. How did they get that scar? If they've ever been arrested. In fact, now, in many states, you can't even ask what their previous salary was. So there's a lot of rules and regulations that you need to make sure that everyone on your interviewing panel and team, they're aware of, so you avoid those, because it's a huge, huge, huge no-no. And again, something as simple as commenting on someone's last name is definitely frowned upon. So looking to avoid these mistakes, I'm kind of wrapping up a bit early, so I'm going to give you back your day, and we'll look and see if we have any questions coming up as well. But obviously, as you're interviewing, make sure that you define the culture fit, the skill fit that's going to work best for you, and really, really focus on it. But don't get tied into an emotional decision. So as you assess the candidates, don't just hire someone because you really, really, really like them. Make sure that they are going to fit well within your organization. They're going to be a culture fit, and their skills are going to complement your team and your program. Always make sure that you have backup options. It drives me crazy when I have a company that I send them 6 people and they zone in on 1 person, and they don't do anything else to the other 5 people. So if you're going through the interview process, make sure you have a good slate. Don't just, zero in on 1 person, because I guarantee you, if you zero in on 1 person, that 1 person probably has, again, 5 other companies that they're looking at, and they're within the top 3 of those other 5 companies. So make sure that you have a good slate of candidates that you're considering. And don't delay. Don't drag out the process. Candidates are getting picked up left and right, and the interviewing process is much, much shorter and consolidated. So make sure that your interviewing time frame makes sense. Make sure that you're making decisions shortly thereafter the interview. You can't wait a week, 2 weeks to get back to a candidate or hiring or human resources on which candidates you like. Once you have that interview, sit down as a team and decide who you want to move forward with, and schedule that. If you have to do on-site, schedule it very, very quickly in the process. Make sure that you're communicating a very clear message to your recruiting and interviewing team. That's so important. If you look at your job description, again, make sure it's communicating a clear message. But even something as simple as the degree, is it preferred or required? If you put required and you say to your HR department that you're requiring a degree or you're requiring a certification, they may not reach out or qualify or recruit candidates without a degree or without a certification. Those candidates could be excellent, excellent fits for your program, for your company. So if you are requiring something, or even if you prefer it, make sure that your HR recruiting team or management team, they're open to looking at candidates who may not have this specific certification or may not have 5 years in the financial industry. Whatever it may be, make sure that you're defining that message up front and you're following along an interview process and recruiting. So you're not eliminating candidates right away that may be fantastic fits. And again, as you're interviewing, make sure that you go through and genuinely interview for each person and qualify them based on what you developed in your systematic interviewing process, what you defined as far as your personnel needs in the program, what's going to work best, and don't make that emotional decision. So I'm going to jump to questions now to see if we have any questions in the chat box. And so if anyone has any questions now, I encourage you to type away. I don't see any quite yet, but let me just jump to my contact information. I encourage you to, just going to go forward, it's not. Okay, it's not going. Oh, there we go. There we go. If anyone has any questions, you can definitely reach out to me at the end. Actually, it looks like we do have one question. I apologize. Let me look. Let's see. Can I get this? I'm trying to get it. We have a couple questions, actually. I'm wondering if Bill, if he's able to see them.
Yes, Cheyenne. Great webinar. Thanks. Do you have a recorded session of candidates pre-interview to prep for an in-person interview with the hiring manager, or provide any references to check out?
Oh, just so I clarify, so looking for kind of an interview prep for candidates, kind of a pre-recorded interview prep?
Right, yeah, for the candidates.
I do have that. In fact, I've shared it a couple times. So if anyone wants access to that, definitely send me an email. You can see the email on the screen here. Definitely send me an email. I do have pre-recorded, kind of the same thing, but for the candidates, on how to write a resume, on how to prep for an interview, on how to go through the searching for a new position, what to look for, what not to look for. Yeah, I definitely have that, as well as we have phone interview prep, we have in-person interview prep, and within that pre-recorded candidate sample, we do have a location to go to search for sample behavioral questions and other types of questions as well, to just prep for the interview. Good question. I think there's another one, right, Bill?
No, that was just a supplement to that first question.
Okay, perfect. Well, if anyone has any other questions, definitely feel free to send me a message via email. And I encourage you, if you are looking to hire and if you're really struggling, again, it's a different market out there, and we're more than happy to help. I know human resources, they try to keep it to 60 to 90 days before they can engage us, but unfortunately, the market is just not the way it used to be. So it's definitely not their fault, or they're not trying hard enough, and we're definitely here to help if we can.
Thank you very much.
That's it. I think, yeah, I was going to say, I can give everyone their day back.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today.